Hi, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thought I'd start with a business case before we get into the content. Now, due to some technical limitations, I was not able to present video, but for those who picked up on the text and the screenshot, you might know this is a scene from Monty Python's The Holy Grail. There is a dead collector coming around yelling, "Bring out your dead," and a large man comes with somebody over his shoulder saying, "Here's one," and the dead collector is going to give him some money, and the man wakes up and says, "I'm not dead." What? Large man says, "No, nothing," and the man yells again, "I'm not dead." The says, "Wait, he says he's not dead." "Yes, he is." "I'm not. He isn't." "Well, he will be soon. He's very ill." And the dead man says, I'm getting better." And he says, "No, you're not. You'll be stone dead in a minute." And can't take him like that. He doesn't want to go on the cart, and so on, right? He feels fine, and eventually he gets bonked over the head and put on the cart. Hopefully people have seen this movie and understand the reference. But the point is, in terms of project assessments and project plans, failing all around, right? There's a lot of dead projects that are out there in the industry. If you look at Gartner or Standish or any of these others, they give most projects a 20 or 30% success rate based on different types of criteria. Some projects choose to ignore that they're failing, like the man who says he's not dead, when in fact he is going to wind up on the cart. You don't want to wind up on the cart of dead projects, and therefore the proposal is you probably want to assess your health on a regular basis. So hopefully that metaphor makes sense and leads into why we should be assessing the health of our projects and programs. And so for today, I'll be talking about the context of an assessment. What is the approach required to conduct an assessment, and then the steps along that approach, which includes defining the plan, collecting the information, gather the assessment, and then packaging it and presenting it to the appropriate stakeholders. So as I mentioned, the corporations are investing a significant amount more money in IT solutions and projects. If you listen to Forrester, a couple of years ago, we spent $2 trillion worldwide spending on IT. And Standish is saying we spent more than $250 billion on IT development, with roughly 200,000 projects. And they've got a whole set of assessments on the size of projects and the success rate. And again, they put them at less than 30%. So technology investment is growing. It's becoming much more complicated. The business is becoming more complicated with more complicated products and offerings, and companies are taking larger bets on their strategies. So, if that's the context, if that's the trends that we're working in, what does that mean for projects? So you've got the trends in the first box. So projects and programs are becoming much bigger. Technology is growing, and the number of technology components and integration points is growing exponentially. There's many more stakeholders to manage, and projects and programs have to take a broader focus. They can no longer stand in isolation within their organization. And here's the results that I mentioned on Standish. 31% of projects get canceled before they're finished. More than half of projects' costs will double from their original estimate. Only 16% complete on time and on budget. And I think, if you throw scope in there, it probably goes down even lower. And you can see the 42% of planned scope. So projects are getting bigger, and at the same time, not delivering as successfully as their stakeholders probably want and expect. And there's consequences of doing that. Maybe it's a delayed market offering, a product that the business was trying to deploy in a certain date, which now makes them less competitive in the marketplace. Maybe there's a customer-facing capability that gets impacted. There might be compliance risk and penalties for those companies that work in regulated industries. There might be significant penalties for missing deadlines. The corporate reputation, as well as the stock price, right, which could be impacted. So as mentioned, corporations are investing much more money in projects. The success rate is lower, and the implications of that lowered success rate are significant. So it's probably a good idea to perform project assessments. Of sort of proactively understanding where there's risks to these and possibly even mitigating them before they come to fruition. Audits or assessments are usually interesting. Not really sure what's going to come out of them, as Tom Hanks will remind us. And, when I say assessments, there's a couple of types of assessments we can think of, and so I've categorized in this slide. One is sort of your classic project audit, large initiative, and there might be an internal audit or even an external one brought in, sort of an external party that looks at delivery risks, maybe corporate standards and controls. Another type is looking at a software delivery lifecycle assessment, so think of that sort of as phase gates or governance, where at specific points during the project lifecycle, the project delivery gets assessed and sort of approved to move on to the next phase. The third, where I've actually spent a decent amount of my career on, is troubled project assessment. So by the time it's gotten to a bad point, or maybe an executive, their spider senses are tingling that the project isn't going as well as they would think, they ask somebody to come in and look at the risks and issues and identify where there might be opportunities to improve them. Sort of a reactive way is a post-implementation review, which is once the project has completed, understanding lessons learned and how can you operationalize those in future projects and so on. And then the last one is sort of a readiness assessment of how well the project is ready, if it should be funded, looking sort of at an early phase. So like I said, a lot of different ways of assessing projects and programs, but the approach taken is actually the same for all of them. And so I submit that there's 4 steps to any kind of assessment or audit. The first one is understanding the plan. So what is the approach for the assessment? What are the activities required? The inventories of information that are requested, as well as planning for the assessment, meetings, logistics, who am I going to talk to, and so on. And the planning is a pretty substantial part of the assessment, and it sets the stage for the rest of it. It is around collecting information, and there's really 2 types of information collected. The first is interviews and talking to people, and the second is looking at documents, program and project level documents. And so once that information is collected, step 3 is sort of going back, synthesizing all of that information, assessing it, understanding where there might be gaps or risks, and coming up with a set of recommendations. And then the 4th big bucket is packaging all that information together and communicating and reporting it out. So, pretty simple at a high level, but very much applicable to the different types of assessments that one can conduct. Thinking about a couple considerations during the approach phase. Being practical with information gathered. So, the program, most of my programs have thousands and thousands of documents and thousands of people working on them. So you don't necessarily have to talk to all of them. So figuring out what is the most valuable place to spend your time. The timing might matter. So whether it's at the end of a critical phase, thinking about the best timing to conduct the assessment. Probably not too late so that you actually have time to make changes and remediate, but probably not too early when there's not enough information available. The safety is always interesting because every time I do an assessment, there's always a view that you're looking at people and performance and trying to cut jobs and so on. And so setting the context for the safety of the employees is always important. Being cognizant with time, so this comes to planning as well. And so the right amount of planning will force efficiency with people's time and asking questions once and not asking questions that one could get the answer for before the meeting, and therefore you're being efficient with people's time because you don't need to have 10 follow-up meetings. Managing expectations is important. Here's what the assessment is. Here's what we're expecting to get out of it. Assessors is always an interesting one. I've managed probably 20 some odd large programs, and I always enjoy when I get an assessment by somebody who has significantly less experience assessing my work, as I'm sure most project managers would feel the same way. So making sure that the person doing the assessment has enough credibility that they can synthesize, ask the right questions, and so on. Understanding the culture of the company is really important, whether that's how to interact with managers or so on. I think that helps in the planning. Focusing on the facts and looking for themes so it doesn't become sort of interpersonal so much as these are the facts.